5 seconds you touched her soul. Have you ever wondered whether a woman genuinely felt something deep with you, or whether you were simply another person passing through her life? Because sometimes the strongest connection isn't announced with a confession. There is no dramatic speech, no obvious declaration. Instead, it appears in small changes you almost miss. She remembers something you said weeks ago. Her voice becomes softer when she talks to you. She starts revealing parts of herself that she normally keeps hidden. And sometimes she becomes unusually quiet, not because she feels nothing, but because she feels more than she knows how to explain. But here's where most people get it wrong. They think touching someone's soul means making her obsessed, chasing her, or creating some intense emotional reaction. It doesn't. A genuine emotional connection is much quieter than that. It happens when someone feels seen, understood, safe enough to be vulnerable, and respected enough to remain themselves. So if you've been wondering whether you truly left a mark on her heart, pay attention to what happens after the conversation ends, after the excitement fades, and when she has nothing to prove. Because the first sign may look completely ordinary. The second can be easy to dismiss, but by the time you reach the fifth sign, you'll understand something most people completely misunderstand about emotional connection. And more importantly, you'll know the difference between temporary attraction and something that actually reached a deeper part of her. Let's start with the sign people overlook most. There is a difference between someone enjoying your company and someone emotionally carrying a piece of the experience with them after you leave. When you touch someone's life on a deeper level, the connection doesn't simply disappear when the conversation ends. It continues quietly. Maybe she hears a song and remembers something you said. Maybe she walks past a place where you once had a meaningful conversation and suddenly thinks about that moment. Maybe she encounters a situation that reminds her of advice you gave her. You aren't necessarily on her mind every second. That's not what emotional connection means. The important thing is that something about the interaction became meaningful enough to create an emotional association, and this is where people often make the wrong assumption. They think, if she really cares, she should constantly contact me. Not necessarily. People process emotions differently. Some become expressive. Others become reflective. Some immediately talk about what they feel. Others need time to understand their own emotions. So instead of measuring connection only by how frequently she messages you, pay attention to whether your presence has influenced the way she thinks, remembers, or responds to certain experiences. That is much more revealing. And there's another detail here that matters even more. When someone feels genuinely understood, they often begin remembering the little things, not because they are trying to impress you, but because the conversation mattered. Maybe you mentioned a goal you were working toward. Maybe she remembers the story you told about your childhood. Maybe she asked about something you casually mentioned weeks earlier. That tiny question can carry more emotional weight than 100 shallow compliments, because attention is often a form of emotional investment. And if you're already recognizing this in your situation, don't rush to label it as love. A meaningful connection doesn't automatically guarantee romantic feelings. It simply means something about the interaction mattered. And that distinction is important because the next sign goes deeper. If this is already making you look differently at the connections in your own life, take a second to like the video. It helps support the channel, and more importantly, stay with me, because the next signs reveal what happens when emotional connection starts turning into genuine vulnerability. One of the clearest signs that you reached someone emotionally is that they begin showing you a version of themselves that they don't show everyone else. Think about it. Most people have layers. There is the public version, the confident version, the polite version, the version they use around coworkers, acquaintances, and people they don't completely trust. Then there is the private version, the uncertain version, the tired version, the emotional version, the version that doesn't always have the perfect answer. And when someone begins allowing you to see that side, something important is happening. They may tell you about something that hurt them years ago. They may admit that they're afraid of failing. They may talk about a personal insecurity. They may share a dream they rarely tell people about. Or they might simply stop pretending that everything is fine when it isn't. That doesn't necessarily mean they're romantically interested, but it can mean they trust you enough to lower a wall. And vulnerability is rarely random. People don't usually reveal their most sensitive thoughts to everyone they meet. They choose, sometimes consciously, sometimes instinctively. And that's why the quality of the conversation matters more than the quantity. Imagine she tells you about a difficult experience. One person immediately gives advice. Another changes the subject. Another turns the conversation into a story about themselves. But you simply listen. You don't judge. You don't minimize what she felt. You don't tell her she's being dramatic. You allow her experience to exist. That can create something powerful, because being heard without being corrected can make a person feel emotionally safe. And emotional safety is one of the foundations of meaningful connection. Here's the part most people miss. When someone opens up, they're not always asking you to solve the problem. Sometimes they're asking, without saying it directly, can I be myself around you? Will you think less of me if you see this side? Will you use what I tell you against me? Can I trust you with something that matters? Your response answers those questions. And if your response communicates patience, respect, and understanding, the conversation can become more meaningful than you realize. But there is a subtle warning. Don't confuse vulnerability with permission to cross boundaries. If she shares something personal, that doesn't mean you now have access to every part of her life. Trust grows when vulnerability is respected, not exploited. And that brings us to the third sign. Because sometimes the strongest evidence that you touched someone emotionally isn't what she reveals to you. It's what she starts revealing about herself to herself. Here's where things get interesting. A person can enjoy talking to you without being changed by the conversation, but occasionally someone enters your life and makes you think differently. You ask questions you never asked before. You reconsider decisions. You become more honest with yourself. You start confronting things you've been avoiding. And when your presence encourages someone to reflect on their own life, you may have reached a much deeper level of connection. Maybe she once told you she always puts everyone else first. You asked her calmly, but when do you choose yourself? Maybe she had a dream she kept postponing. You didn't tell her what to do. You simply asked why she had stopped believing it was possible. Maybe she was convinced that showing emotion made her weak. You treated emotional honesty as something human rather than something embarrassing. Those moments can stay with people, not because you gave them some magical sentence, but because you gave them permission to look at themselves differently. And that is a completely different kind of impact. Think about the people who have genuinely influenced your own life. Often, you don't remember every conversation, but you remember how they made you think. You remember the question they asked. You remember the moment something clicked. That's what emotional impact can look like. And here's the contradiction. If you've truly touched someone's soul, she may not always tell you immediately. Sometimes the deepest realizations happen privately. She might go home and think about the conversation. She might replay something you said. She might recognize a pattern in her life that she hadn't noticed before. She might even disagree with you initially. And that's okay. A meaningful conversation doesn't need immediate agreement to have value. Sometimes the seed takes time. But there's another layer. If she begins making healthier choices, setting stronger boundaries, pursuing something important to her, or speaking about herself with greater confidence after conversations with you, don't automatically assume that you caused all of it. People change for many reasons. But you may have been part of a moment that helped her see something differently. And that is a powerful kind of connection, because genuine influence doesn't control someone. It gives them more freedom to become themselves. And the fourth sign takes us into territory where many people accidentally destroy the very connection they were trying to build, because sometimes after realizing someone cares, people become impatient. They start demanding reassurance. They start testing feelings. They start asking, do you miss me? Why didn't you text? Do you really care about me? And suddenly, something that felt emotionally safe begins feeling like an emotional examination. That's the mistake. One of the strongest signs that you touched someone deeply is that she feels comfortable being emotionally honest with you without constantly having to perform for your approval. She can disagree. She can say no. She can have a bad day. She can be quiet. She can tell you something you don't want to hear, and you don't punish her for it. That's important because connection isn't proven when everything is easy. It's revealed when there is room for difference. Imagine she tells you, I don't think I agree with you. A person focused on control might become defensive. A person focused on connection might say, that's okay. Tell me why. That single response changes the entire emotional atmosphere. It communicates, you don't have to agree with me to be safe with me. That is powerful. And it is also where self-respect matters. Healthy connection doesn't mean becoming endlessly available. It doesn't mean ignoring your own boundaries. It doesn't mean accepting disrespect because you're afraid of losing someone. You can care deeply and still have standards. You can be emotionally open and still say no. You can love someone's presence and still understand that their choices belong to them. This is what mature connection looks like. Not possession, not control, not emotional dependency. Two people choosing each other freely. And if she feels that freedom around you, she may become more emotionally authentic. She doesn't have to guess what version of herself will keep you interested. She can simply be herself. But there's one more sign, and this one may be the most revealing because it has very little to do with what happens during the emotional moment. It has everything to do with what happens afterward. When someone genuinely values a connection, they often demonstrate it through consistency, not perfection, consistency. There is a difference. Maybe she checks in when she knows you've had a difficult day. Maybe she remembers something important to you. Maybe she makes time when life gets busy. Maybe she follows through on something she promised. Maybe she tells you when something is wrong instead of silently disappearing. These aren't dramatic movie moments. They're small behaviors. But small behaviors repeated over time often tell you more than dramatic declaration because anyone can say, you mean a lot to me. The deeper question is, how does that belief appear in their behavior? And this is where you should slow down because people sometimes mistake intensity for connection. A relationship can feel incredibly intense and still be unstable. Constant texting doesn't automatically equal emotional depth. Jealousy doesn't automatically equal love. Arguments don't automatically mean passion. And someone missing you doesn't automatically mean they are ready for a healthy relationship. Intensity can be temporary. Consistency reveals character. So if you truly touched her soul, don't look only for emotional fireworks. Look for something quieter. Does she treat your feelings with respect? Does she communicate honestly? Does she make an effort to understand you? Does she remember what matters to you? Does she respect your boundaries? Does she show up consistently? And perhaps most importantly, can the connection survive ordinary days? Because anyone can feel close during a powerful conversation. The real test is what happens on Tuesday afternoon when nothing dramatic is happening. That is where genuine connection becomes visible. And now we reach the question that matters most. If you've recognized some of these signs, what should you actually do? This is where many people make the biggest mistake. They discover that someone may care deeply about them, and immediately they start trying to get more attention, more reassurance, more messages, more emotional confirmation. They think, now that I know she feels something, how do I make her feel even more? But that's the wrong question. The better question is, how do I protect the quality of the connection that already exists? Because once you understand that, your behavior changes. You stop trying to force moments. You stop creating artificial distance just to see if she'll chase you. You stop using jealousy as a test. You stop withholding affection to gain power. And you stop treating emotional vulnerability like a bargaining chip. Instead, you become consistent. If she opens up, listen. If she sets a boundary, respect it. If you disagree, communicate instead of punishing. If you care, express it honestly. If you're confused, ask rather than assuming. And if her interest isn't mutual, accept that with dignity. That's not weakness. That's emotional maturity. Here's a simple example. Imagine she becomes quieter than usual. You could immediately think she's losing interest. Then send 5 messages. Ask what's wrong. Demand an explanation. Become cold because you're afraid. Or you could approach it differently. You might say, "You seem a little distant today. If something is bothering you, I'm here." No pressure. Then give her room. That one response communicates care without control. It communicates interest without desperation. And it gives her something incredibly important. Choice. If she wants to talk, she can. If she needs space, she can have it. If the relationship matters to both of you, honest communication becomes possible. And that's the deeper lesson. You don't build a strong emotional connection by constantly trying to create emotional reactions. You build it by becoming someone with whom honesty feels safe, someone who listens, someone who communicates, someone who keeps their word, someone who respects boundaries, someone who doesn't disappear whenever things become uncomfortable, and someone who doesn't abandon themselves just to keep another person. Because self-respect and emotional connection aren't opposites. They strengthen each other. If you constantly sacrifice your values for someone's approval, eventually the connection becomes unhealthy. But when 2 people can care about each other while remaining whole individuals, something much more stable can develop. That's the kind of connection worth protecting. And if you have genuinely touched her soul, you don't need to constantly prove it. Her behavior will eventually tell you, not through one perfect message, not through one emotional night, but through patterns, through consistency, through trust, through the way she allows herself to be seen, and through the way she makes room for you in her life. So let's bring everything together. Maybe she remembers the little things. Maybe she opens up about parts of herself she rarely shares. Maybe your conversations cause her to reflect more deeply. Maybe she feels safe enough to disagree with you without fearing rejection. And maybe her care appears through consistent actions rather than dramatic words. None of these signs should be treated like mathematical proof of romantic feelings. People are complicated. Context matters. And one behavior can mean different things for different people. But together, these signs can reveal something meaningful. The connection has emotional weight. And when that happens, your responsibility isn't to control the outcome. It's to handle the connection with care, because touching someone's soul isn't about becoming unforgettable through manipulation. It's about creating a moment or many moments in which another human being feels genuinely seen. Maybe she was having a difficult season, and your words reminded her that she wasn't alone. Maybe she doubted herself, and your encouragement helped her believe in herself again. Maybe she had become afraid of vulnerability, and your patience showed her that honesty didn't have to be dangerous. And maybe she eventually chooses to continue that connection with you, or maybe life takes you in different directions. Either way, the impact can still have been real. That's something worth understanding. Not every meaningful connection is measured by whether someone stays forever. Sometimes its value is found in what 2 people awakened in each other while they were together. So if you're wondering whether you've truly reached her heart, stop obsessing over one text message. Stop analyzing every pause. Stop searching for secret codes in every little behavior. Look at the bigger picture. Look at trust. Look at consistency. Look at vulnerability. Look at respect. Look at whether both people are becoming more honest, more secure, and more themselves, because real emotional connection doesn't make you smaller. It doesn't make you constantly anxious. It doesn't require you to manipulate someone into staying. The healthiest connection gives both people room to breathe while still giving them a reason to come closer. And perhaps that's the greatest sign of all. When someone can be completely themselves around you, and you can be completely yourself around them, without fear, games, or pressure, something much deeper than attraction may be taking place. That's when connection becomes meaningful. That's when trust becomes real. And that's when you stop asking, how do I make her feel something? And start asking a much better question. How can we create something honest enough that neither of us has to pretend? If this video gave you a new perspective on emotional connection, like the video and subscribe for more psychology, relationships, confidence, and personal growth content. And in the comments, write real connection if you believe genuine connection is built through trust, not games, because the people who truly touch our souls aren't always the ones who say the perfect things. Sometimes they're simply the people who make us feel safe enough to become more of who we already are.